Okay, so how could the government reduce all of this red ink, right? Red ink meaning deficits. Well, it could increase taxes for everybody, raise more taxes so that it reduces the deficits and maybe even starts to push us into budget surplus. It could tax only the rich, perhaps. It could reduce expenditures rather than increase taxes. And on top of that, kind of related to reducing expenditures, it could whittle away, slowly reduce entitlements, which are things like Social Security and welfare benefits. Now, in considering how expenditures might be reduced, it's important to look at these entitlements, right? Social Security benefits, welfare, food stamps, Medicare and Medicaid, right? These are federal government payments that are basically legal legislated obligations that cannot be reduced or eliminated without major laws being passed. So it's hard to make adjustments on those entitlement programs. So let's think about another solution potentially. What if the rich were to respond to higher average and marginal income taxes by engaging in fewer activities which were subject to taxation? So the additional revenues derived from imposing higher taxes on the rich would likely be lower than anticipated if they're sort of dodging the tax. And thus the deficit reduction benefit from levying higher taxes only on the rich is likely to be smaller than initially projected. So that's an interesting thing to think about when trying to reduce the debt. Now, again, entitlements are these guaranteed benefits under government programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So there's not really much they can do about those expenditures, the government, without a major legislative overhaul. And so, there are also these non-controllable expenditures, which are government spending that change automatically without any congressional action. So these are the automatic stabilizers we talked about in the last chapter, things like unemployment benefits, as well as the our progressive tax system. All right, let's look at the components of federal expenditures as percentage of total federal spending. Okay, so we've got our entitlement programs here in red, those expenditures that the government can't very easily change. We have national defense, and then everything else in the green line here. So as you can see, those entitlement programs are taking up a larger and larger chunk. In fact, it's a majority of our government spending since the early 90s. It's the majority of government spending, those entitlement programs. And then national defense, back around World War II was almost all of government spending. And then it kind of bounced again. I think this is the Korean War in here. But it's actually been falling despite how large it is. And then everything else is kind of right around national defense, which is kind of crazy to think about, right? Aside from entitlement programs, everything that the government spends on everything else other than national defense is about equal to what we spend on national defense. So that's kind of crazy to think about. So as we saw in that graph, entitlements are the largest component of the U.S. federal budget deficit, or the federal budget. So if we really are serious about making significant cuts in expenditures, these entitlement programs have to be revised, which again is going to be would take a major act of Congress, okay? Because as of now, there are basically hard set laws that those payments have to be made.